Oh, it's time for Shelf Life, news from the Whitchurch-Stouffville Public Library, with your host, librarian Catherine Sword.
Hello, everyone, and today is Author Visit, and we have returning author Mike Poeltl, and he's coming back to tell us about his third book, the third in the trilogy. Finally, we've got completion in this. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your third book and how it came out.
Well, the third book is entitled Revelation, and it was themed with the Judas Syndrome series. I used a different voice,
Yes.
a different character for each book. And the third book made sense to carry on with the voice of Leaf, who was Sarah and Joel's child, who you got to meet in the second book. And in the third book, he is 18, and his voice is what carries the story.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And actually, after the first one, I believe you told me that you had envisioned one story at one time, and out of that developed three?
That's right. As you know, the first book, as you said, it was to be a standalone effort. But through reader demand, I had a lot of curious questions about what's next. As much as the first book was an ending for me, I did see a lot of potential in that.
Right.
And I did see that there was a lot more story to tell. As you know, the book went untouched for many years until I got it to my editor. And once she started that, I pulled that together, and then now I have a trilogy.
Yeah, you've got three. That's right. We'll talk a little bit about the first-person narrative, because I'm curious why you chose that. All three novels do this. They speak from someone's voice.
Right.
And this one is going to be Leaf.
Yep. What I love about the first person is the intimate connection you have right away with your reader. And the character's sort of in your head. You're the character, essentially, and you experience everything they do. It's as though the character has hijacked or possessed your mind, and you read on as they make mistakes and wrong turns and relive happy memories that aren't your own. For me, it's a comfortable place for the reader.
Okay. And actually, in the third book especially, you start to feel, as a reader, I think, you get to see a little bit more of the surroundings. And it's funny because the third book is so contained. It's one little geography. They don't do the great trips that they did in the first and the second.
Right. And because of that, I think is why I brought Earl into it as well, to give you that angle of the villain, essentially. And
you need to have that.
Yeah, it was fun to do. It was interesting to write. I mean, you have a Leaf who was the hero, essentially, a misplaced hero trying to do his best, and then Earl who came back.
Would you say he came back specifically because he was angry? He keeps a festering.
Yeah, he's an angry man for sure, but he's a man who's driven by purpose. He's always seen himself as that leader and wanted to have everything.
We'll come back hopefully to the leadership idea when we get to Earl, but for now, I'd also like to point out that though you've got heroes, they're flawed, and that was the thing with Joel in the first one, flawed. I'm not going to give away. People should read the first one and discover that flaw for themselves. And then we have Leaf. Shall we introduce the listeners to Leaf?
Sure, let's do that. I watch as an army camp among the trunks of dead trees to the west from my vantage point at the edge of this rocky hill. The ruined forest offers modest privacy and even less protection should we decide to attack them before they do us. But the sergeant and I have agreed that we are better suited to defend our position within the walls of our compound, rather than risk openly attacking a group so large and desperate. My blank man is with me now. Blank man is the name I gave to him when we first met at the age of 6. I can feel his presence. Each time he appears, the hairs on the back of my neck and forearm prick up. He is dark and has no features save what I can make out of his silhouette. His voice is calm and soothing. Mom calls him my guardian angel, and he even has a halo of sorts, not confined to his head, but surrounding his entire being. If I'd given him a face, he would have one, but I have not in my 12 years of knowing him. Some months before I will be faced with the vision of an army at our doors, I find myself staring at the forests within our walls. They contain trees taller than our tallest building, pine, deciduous, fruit-bearing, with birds and insects buzzing around. From the dust of my mother's apocalypse, 20 years later, we have trees planted firmly in the soil. We have re-established life where it was once devastated by a desperate, deliberate act of violence. I have led a privileged life in comparison to those outside our fortified walls. To have grown up at all is a gift in the wasteland beyond our oasis. I have learned that life is a gift, and should be cherished, lived, and experienced. Though experience often reveals itself as pain in this world, it is still purposeful. It still has its place in the evolution of our spirit. My name is Leaf. I've been told that my father was meant for this end, but my father faltered in his attempt, afraid of this destiny, afraid of himself. It has been made clear to me that I was born to carry the torch, that the spirit of my father lives on in me. Though that phrase may seem cliché, it should be taken literally rather than figuratively. I am the reincarnation of my father. My angel has told me as much, and my mom has confirmed it, pointing out the bizarre birthmark on my right arm. It is a dark line that travels the circumference of the forearm, just below the elbow. Mom says this resembles a wound my father suffered not long before he died.
That was wonderful, Mike. Thank you so much for that. And that also starts to give us a flavor of some of the philosophy, because I'm very impressed that you don't shy away from the big issues in this book, like reincarnation, like impermanence and whatnot. And you do it in not a preachy way. So what kind of research have you done to learn about this?
I'm glad you said it's not a preachy way, because that was the most difficult thing, to bring in existing ideas and your own ideas about things and to not preach about them. That was tough, actually, to write into a fictional character story. But, I read a lot. Buddhism is something that's fascinated me.
I wondered.
I appreciate the whole theory behind reincarnation and the whole journey of the spirit through that and learning here in this world. And when I sort of put that together with the science of quantum physics, that was another big hurdle. But what I wanted to do with this book was to put the two together and make you understand my point of science and spirituality sharing a theory.
Yes. I think somewhere in the book you say something about, and I thought it was a great question, you challenged one character to ask themselves, why did you choose this path? And I think that might be one of the strengths about fiction and why I like this kind of science fiction. Science fiction, and that this is a futuristic story, is that it poses those questions for the reader. You don't answer.
Right, exactly. And that's the fun part, right? I mean, that's fun for the reader, too. And it's something I like to do throughout the books, is sort of leave you hanging here and there with questions for yourself and offer that, yeah.
Hanging off that string theory.
Exactly. I put the string theory out there. It's definitely quantum physics science I've been interested in for years.
Yes.
It's so impossibly interesting and difficult to get your head around. I hope that I made it make sense in the book.
I think so. Well, you don't go into a great depth, so a person's not going to feel that they've been pushed into the deep end of this stuff.
Right.
I think just enough that a person is curious and, oh, really? Now, did you have an author who, I'm trying to think, Brian Greene, I think, Elegant Universe?
I know it. I've read it.
Is that one that you would recommend for someone who is curious to follow this up?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's a great book. It's a beautiful book, actually. Something exactly that I would have read in the past that sort of sparked my interests.
Good. That's what I had thought, too. On that note, one of my favorite science fiction writers is Robert Sawyer. I don't know if you're a fan of Sawyer.
Dan Simmons is my favorite.
Dan Simmons, okay.
Yeah,
I haven't tried him.
He's incredible, yeah.
Is he?
Phenomenal.
Well, why I like Sawyer is that he does what you're doing, is he takes some of the science and then he puts it into a discussion with his characters in such a way that I, the layperson, can get an idea of it. Does Simmons do that?
He's a little more involved.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit more involved.
Okay, so I'll start off with my Robert Sawyer, work up to Simmons.
I think so, yeah.
But perhaps we can give our audience a little flavor about your philosophy through your characters with another reading.
Perfect.
You think that?
Let's do it. In the hospital, I catch Dr. Bren moving through my peripheral. "Doctor," I whisper, rising slowly from the chair next to Mary's bed, my hand never leaving hers. "Could I speak with you?" "Please," Dr. Bren motions for me to follow him. "Back soon," I promise her, kissing her hand before resting it upon her chest. Mary nods and smiles weakly at me, blinking twice and then closing her eyes. As we enter the doctor's office, he waves for me to sit in one of the worn plush leather seats. I remain standing. "I would like to know the extent of Mary's injuries." "Of course." He takes his seat. "Mary's reflexes and other motor controls are perfect, Leaf. Her speech and memory and problem-solving abilities are all excellent. She has recovered completely." "That is good news." "Yes," his eyes narrow. "But you knew that, didn't you?" "I figured. And the question is not about her mental and physical recovery. I was hoping you might have some information to offer from past events. Have any other patients had a similar experience? Dr. Bren moves behind his desk and opens a drawer. He carefully places a folder 3 inches thick on his desk's smooth metallic surface. This has been something of a pet project of mine. He taps the folder with his palm. When you lose a patient on the table, you lose a part of yourself. Then you start looking for answers. First you look for the mistakes. You look at procedure, and you wonder if you could have done something differently. Then, when all avenues have been exhausted, you look beyond the factual. You look for something more, some point to it all. And this is your research? I point to the blue folder laid out on his desk. Yes, I have had patients die on my table, but some of them came back, like Mary. He opens the file. What those people said to me about where they went and what they saw and felt has intrigued me. His long, narrow fingers trace the profiles of dozens of case studies on the subject of near-death experiences. Then you believe. He straightens up. I'm a doctor, a surgeon. Though these accounts are inspiring, I'm a man of science. I believe in the visceral. If I can see it, touch it, if I can feel it, then it's real to me. But your file, you must believe on some level if you've carried this file with you all these years. No, Leaf, I don't. These files challenge the statements from those people. He closes the folder and looks up at me. Whatever it was your Mary experienced, it was not life after death. Not in my opinion. My research says her experience was that of an oxygen-starved brain calming the mind and preparing it for death. And how do you justify that explanation? Through the research of great surgeons, those who've dedicated their time to the study and mapping of the human brain. He sits back in his chair. I know what you believe, Leaf. I respect your beliefs, and I believe in meditation. But I cannot tell you I believe in life after death. Consider what science knows. As the brain gets closer and closer to death, it only fires in areas which are very basic to survival, closer to the brainstem, a fundamental and primitive part of the brain. So when the visual cortex, the back part of the brain, or the superior colliculus, which is considered part of the brain stem, are activated, all you'll see is light. I sit forward in my chair, fascinated by his clinical explanation. And that point of light is surrounded by darkness. Our best interpretation would be of being in a tunnel. Everyone that has had a near-death experience has this shared vision. It is much like dreaming, disjointed images, nonsense dialogue. It pulls from the same place. In near death, the central nervous system reanimates our most primal memories, our most deep-seated life experiences. You could say your whole life passes before your eyes. So what about out-of-body experiences? I mean, you're telling me the near-death experience is the brain putting a person at ease, but it is often accompanied by an out-of-body experience. How can that be explained? I can't explain that, Leaf. I won't even try. I can only comment on the science, not on the spiritual. But you understand a man lying flat on an operating table, for all intents and purposes, dead, who can describe how many people were in the room and even what they looked like once revived, isn't experiencing a hallucination. I'm not qualified to answer that, Leaf. You are if you have an opinion, Doctor. He laughs and shakes his head at me. Sure, Leaf. If I had to answer that, I would say no. He's not having a hallucination. He's dead. What then? Perhaps another look through my notes will produce a satisfactory answer for both of us. He opens the folder once more. Thank you for your time, Doctor. I turn and open the door to leave. Leaf, he calls after me, his tone pleasant. I turn. Either way, she's back. A broad smile lightens his face. I smile back. She is, Doctor. Thank you for that. I smile